Dr. Hannah Kim knelt in the red soil of Kepler 442b, carefully examining the crystalline formations that had made this world famous throughout human space. The alien crystals pulsed with an inner light, responding to her scanner's frequencies in ways that defied conventional physics. At 34, she had already published 12 papers on xenobiology, but these formations promised discoveries that could reshape humanity's understanding of life itself. "Mama, look what I found," 7-year-old Jinu's voice carried across the research compound's main courtyard. Hannah looked up to see her son crouched near the settlement's shimmering energy barrier, poking at something in the dirt with a stick. His dark hair caught the alien sun's orange light as he concentrated on his discovery with the intense focus only children could muster. "Stay away from the barrier, sweetheart," Hannah called, wiping sweat from her forehead. The energy field that protected their small outpost hummed constantly, a reassuring sound that had become as familiar as breathing over their 2 years on this frontier world. Beyond the barrier stretched endless plains of rust-colored grass, broken by towering spires of the same crystals she studied. Jinu held up a piece of what looked like fossilized bone, his eyes bright with excitement. "It has funny marks on it, like writing." The boy had inherited his mother's curiosity, always finding treasures in the most unexpected places. Hannah smiled, remembering how her own mother had encouraged similar explorations back on Earth. The research station housed only 43 people, mostly scientists and their families, along with a handful of technicians who kept their equipment running. They had chosen this remote location specifically for its isolation, far from the shipping lanes and territorial disputes that plagued more developed systems. Here, they could work in peace, sending their discoveries back to Earth through quantum. Relay bursts. Dr. Min-Soo Park, the station's chief administrator, emerged from the main laboratory building. "Hannah, we're getting some unusual readings from the orbital sensors," he called out. "Might want to take a look when you have a moment." Before Hannah could respond, the crimson sky above them began to ripple. What had seemed like heat distortion suddenly resolved into the unmistakable outlines of spacecraft descending through the atmosphere. Not human ships, the angular predatory design was something else entirely. Warning klaxons began wailing throughout the compound as automated defense systems came online. "Everyone to the shelters," Dr. Park's voice boomed over the comm system. But the ships were already too close, their weapon ports glowing with malevolent energy. The first plasma bolt struck the communications array in a shower of sparks and molten metal. Hannah ran toward Jinu, her heart hammering against her ribs. The boy stood frozen near the energy barrier, still clutching his fossil, watching the alien ships with wide eyes. More plasma fire rained down, turning prefabricated buildings into infernos and leaving craters in the compound's carefully maintained pathways. "Jinu, come here," she screamed over the chaos. Research assistants and technicians scattered in all directions, some toward the emergency bunkers, others simply running blindly into the wilderness beyond the settlement. The alien ships, she could see now they belonged to the Vorthan Collective, with their distinctive swept-wing design and predatory grace, swept low over the outpost like mechanical vultures. One of the raiders targeted the main power generator. The explosion sent a shockwave across the compound, and the protective energy barrier flickered and died. Suddenly, their small sanctuary was completely exposed to whatever the Vorthans intended. Jinu stumbled backward as debris rained around him. A plasma bolt meant for the child seared through the air where he had been standing moments before. Without thinking, without hesitation, Hannah threw herself forward. Her body collided with her son's just as another volley of energy blasts converged. On their position, the searing heat hit her back and shoulders like liquid fire. Pain beyond description shot through her nervous system as the alien weapons burned through her clothing and flesh. But Jinu was beneath her, protected by her body, and that was all that mattered. She bit back her screams, not wanting to frighten him more than he already was. "Mama?" Jinu's voice was small and terrified beneath her. "I'm here, baby," she whispered, feeling her strength ebbing away with each heartbeat. "I'm right here. Everything's going to be okay." The lie came easily, instinctively, the way all mothers' protective lies do. The attack lasted only 7 minutes, but it felt like hours. When the Vorthan ships finally departed, they left behind a scene of utter devastation. 12 colonists lay dead among the smoking ruins. The research station that had been their home and humanity's foothold on this distant world was nothing but twisted metal and shattered dreams. Genu crawled out from beneath his mother's still form, tears streaming down his dirt-stained face. "Mama, Mama, wake up." But Dr. Hana Kim had given everything she had to save the most precious thing in her universe. The boy's cries echoed across the ruined compound, a sound that would soon echo across all of human space. The quantum relay transmission reached Earth's communication hub at 0347 hours Standard Time. What started as routine data from a frontier research station quickly became something that would shake human civilization to its core. The emergency beacon carried more than just distress signals. It contained 7 minutes of recorded testimony from a traumatized child whose words would ignite the fury of an entire species. Admiral Taemin Lee stood in the strategic command center deep beneath Seoul, his weathered hands gripping the edge of the holographic display table. At 58, he had seen his share of conflicts, from the Martian uprising to the asteroid belt pirates. But nothing had prepared him for watching. 7-year-old Genu Kim described his mother's final moments. "She covered me with her whole body." The boy's voice crackled through the speakers, barely audible between sobs. "The bad ships were shooting fire, and Mama said she wouldn't let them hurt me. She said she loved me, but then she got really quiet and wouldn't wake up anymore." The recording showed Genu sitting on a medical transport, wrapped in a thermal blanket, his small hands still clutching the fossilized bone he had been examining when the attack began. Rescue teams had found him 3 hours after the Vorthan ships departed, still trying to wake his mother's lifeless body. Captain Seojun Yoon, Lee's intelligence officer, approached with grim expression. "Sir, the relay networks are going wild. Every human colony, every space station, every mining operation, they're all demanding copies of this transmission. We can't contain it anymore." Lee nodded slowly. He hadn't expected to contain it. Some things were meant to spread, meant to be witnessed by every human soul in the galaxy. "Let it run. Send it everywhere. Everyone needs to see what they did. To us." On Titan Station, 300 million kilometers from Earth, Supervisor Daeun Han stopped the massive mining operation mid-shift. Her crews gathered in the main assembly hall, their faces illuminated by the blue glow of the holographic projector. Hardened miners who had spent decades carving ice from Saturn's moon stood in absolute silence as Genu's testimony played. By the time it ended, grown men were weeping openly, their massive hands clenched into fists. They killed a mother protecting her baby, whispered Chief Engineer Kyung-Soo Lim, his voice breaking. Around him, 3,000 workers nodded in grim agreement. These were people who had chosen the harsh life of deep space mining, who faced death daily in the frozen void. But this was different. This was an attack on something sacred. Similar scenes played out across human space. On the agricultural worlds of the Outer Rim, farmers abandoned their fields to gather in community centers. The massive generation ships carrying colonists to distant stars held memorial services in their great halls. Even the notorious smugglers and pirates of the asteroid belt transmitted the recording through their networks, their usual cynicism replaced by cold rage. Dr. Sun-hee Cho, director of the Mars Terraforming Project, watched the transmission in her office overlooking the red planet's slowly thickening atmosphere. She had 2 children of her own, sleeping safely in the residential domes kilometers below. The thought of them facing what Genu had experienced made her stomach turn. She activated her personal communicator and began making calls to every research facility under her command. "Cancel all non-essential projects," she ordered each department head. "Redirect our atmospheric processors, our fusion reactors, our manufacturing capabilities. Whatever Earth Command needs, they get it. No questions asked." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, human civilization began shifting its vast industrial capacity toward a single purpose. Shipyards that had been building cargo haulers started retooling for military production. Research stations that had been studying peaceful applications of antimatter suddenly found themselves developing weapons systems. The great orbital factories above Earth hummed with new purpose as their assembly lines adapted to produce instruments of war. On the diplomatic front, the Galactic Assembly convened an emergency session on the neutral station of Nexus Prime. Representatives from 47 different species gathered in the great circular chamber, their various forms of communication filling the air with clicks, whistles and electromagnetic pulses. The attack on Kepler 442b was just one item on a lengthy agenda, squeezed between trade disputes and territorial negotiations. Ambassador Minji Park sat in the human delegation section, her face a mask of controlled fury as she listened to the empty platitudes. The Vothan representative, a creature resembling a massive praying mantis with chrome exoskeleton, dismissed the incident as regrettable but necessary territorial enforcement. The humans violated clearly marked boundaries, the alien clicked, through its translator. Ancient star maps clearly show this system belongs to the Vorten Collective. This was simply an pest control. The chamber erupted in various forms of alien laughter and agreement. To most of the galaxy's species, humanity was still a newcomer, barely worth considering in the grand schemes of interstellar politics. They saw the attack on Kepler 442b as a minor border dispute, easily resolved through bureaucratic channels. Ambassador Park stood slowly, her movement cutting through the alien chatter like a blade. The chamber fell silent as she looked around at the assembled representatives, her dark eyes burning with barely contained emotion. "We remember our children," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. The words were simple, but something in her tone made even the most arrogant aliens shift uncomfortably in their seats. Then she turned and walked out, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. Behind her, the Galactic Assembly continued their debates, unaware that they had just witnessed the moment humanity declared war on the galaxy itself. The transformation of human civilization happened faster than anyone thought possible. Dr. Junho, Kang stood in his laboratory on Europa Station, staring at equations that had once described peaceful fusion reactors. Now those same calculations were being rewritten to create something far more terrible. His hands shook slightly as he input the final parameters into his computer system. "Are you sure about this?" asked his research partner, Dr. Yuna Shin. She had spent 15 years developing clean energy solutions for the outer colonies. The thought of turning their life's work into weapons of destruction made her voice tremble. Junho looked at the holographic display showing little Jinu Kim's testimony, still playing on repeat across every human communication network. "Look at that boy's face," he said quietly. "They murdered his mother right in front of him. If we don't act, how many more children will suffer the same fate?" The fusion containment technology they had perfected could power entire cities for decades. But with some modifications, those same magnetic fields could compress matter to unimaginable densities before releasing it in directed bursts. The energy yield would be beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. Across human space, similar conversations were happening in laboratories, workshops, and research facilities. On Mars, the atmospheric processes that had been slowly terraforming the red planet were being converted into massive industrial complexes. The same machines that created breathable air now churned out hull plating and weapon components. Admiral Taemin Lee walked through the lunar shipyards, watching the most dramatic transformation of all. Assembly lines that had been building peaceful cargo haulers and passenger vessels now hummed with military purpose. The skeletal frames of new warships stretched across the vast construction bays, their angular designs optimized for one thing: destroying Vorten vessels. "How long until the first squadron is ready?" Lee asked Chief Engineer Ho-Seok Park, who had volunteered to oversee the military conversion despite being 3 years into retirement. 2 weeks for the light cruisers, sir," Park replied, his weathered face grim with determination. "The heavy dreadnoughts will take a month, but they'll be worth the wait. These new ships carry enough firepower to crack a moon in half." The speed of production was unprecedented in human history. Every colony, every space station, every mining operation had volunteered their resources without question. The pacifist, worlds that had once refused to even manufacture basic defense systems, now worked around the clock producing ammunition and armor plating. Captain Min Jae Song, a veteran of the Proxima campaign, emerged from retirement on his small farm on New Eden. At 62, he thought his fighting days were behind him, but the image of Hana Kim shielding her son had stirred something deep in his warrior's heart. Within hours of volunteering, he found himself training new recruits at the expanded military academy on Titan. "Listen up, rookies," he barked at the assembled trainees, their young faces eager and determined. "The Vorthans think we're soft because we value peace. They're about to learn that humans don't stay peaceful when someone hurts our children." The training facilities operated 24 hours a day. Simulation pods ran combat scenarios based on every scrap of intelligence about Vorthan tactics. Virtual reality systems allowed pilots to practice flying the new warships before they even rolled off the assembly lines. The recruits trained with an intensity born of righteous fury, each one carrying the memory of little Jinu's tears. Intelligence networks that had been focused on peaceful exploration suddenly turned their attention to military targets. Every human trading post, every diplomatic mission, every scientific expedition began feeding information back to Earth Command. The Vorthans had no idea that their enemy was watching their every move. Commander Hyejin Baek coordinated the intelligence operation from a secure facility deep beneath the Swiss Alps. Her wall-mounted displays showed Vorthan fleet positions throughout their territory, updated in real time by a network of human operatives who had been living among alien species for years. "They have 17 major fleet bases," she reported to Admiral Lee during their daily briefing. 43 smaller installations, and their main shipyard complex orbiting their homeworld. They're completely unprepared for a coordinated assault. What made the human response truly terrifying was their unprecedented unity. For the first time in centuries, every human faction worked toward the same goal. Corporate executives who normally competed fiercely now shared proprietary technologies freely. Military commanders who had been rivals became close collaborators. Scientists who had guarded their research jealously now published their work openly for anyone who could use it. The asteroid mining crews volunteered to weaponize their equipment. The massive industrial ships that carved up space rocks could be converted into kinetic bombardment platforms. Chunks of dense metal accelerated to near light speed would hit Vorthan targets with the force of nuclear weapons. Dr. Soyeon Kim, Hana's sister, arrived at Earth Command headquarters carrying her niece's research notes. Hana was studying something. On Kepler 442b, she told Admiral Lee, her eyes red from crying. Some kind of crystalline formation that amplified energy. If we could weaponize it. The Admiral studied the research data, his tactical mind immediately grasping the implications. "Get this to Dr. Kang immediately. If we can incorporate these crystals into our weapon systems." Within the Lunar Research Facility, teams worked around the clock to understand Hana's final discovery. The alien crystals didn't just amplify energy, they could focus and direct it with surgical precision. Weapons incorporating this technology would be able to punch through any known shield system. As the weeks passed, the greatest military buildup in human history took shape. Fleets assembled at secret staging areas throughout human space. The new warships were sleek and deadly, their hulls bristling with weapons that had never been seen before. Each ship carried the same message painted on its hull in letters of fire. "Remember Hana Kim." The galaxy had no idea what was coming. The Vorthans continued their territorial expansion, confident that the humans would eventually accept their loss and move on. They saw humanity as just another weak species, easily intimidated by superior force. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The human fleet hung in the darkness of space like a constellation of death, their ships arranged, in perfect formation, around 15 Vortan worlds simultaneously. Admiral Taemin Lee stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Hana's Shield, watching the tactical displays show thousands of human warships dropping out of hyperspace with clockwork precision. 3 months of preparation had led to this moment, all. "Fleet's report ready, sir," announced Captain Seo Jun-yoon, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were about to unleash. "Every ship is in position. Every weapon is charged." Lee activated the fleet-wide communication system, his words broadcasting across all human vessels and into the void itself. No diplomacy, no ultimatums, just simple, terrible truth. You murdered a mother shielding her child. Today you learn what that means. The Vorthan orbital defense platforms around their homeworld activated immediately, their ancient energy shields flickering to life like protective cocoons around their most important installations. These barriers had protected the Vorthan collective for over 1,000 years, turning away every weapon their enemies had ever deployed. The aliens considered them unbreakable. Commander Min Jae-song, commanding the Righteous Fury, watched his targeting systems lock onto the nearest Vorthan defensive station. "Fire the crystal lance," he ordered quietly. The weapon that Dr. Junho Kang had developed using Hana Kim's research notes unleashed a beam of concentrated energy that made stars look dim. The Vorthan energy shield met the attack and simply ceased to exist. The beam continued through the barrier as if it had never been there, turning the defensive platform into a brief, brilliant explosion. Across 15 star systems, the same scene played out hundreds of times. Vorthan shields that had never failed suddenly shattered like crystal under the assault of weapons that defied their understanding of physics. The aliens' panicked communications filled the radio spectrum as their supposedly impregnable defenses crumbled in seconds. "Impossible," shrieked the Vorthan fleet commander from his massive dreadnought Apex Predator. "Those barriers have never been breached. What kind of weapons are these creatures using?" His answer came in the form of a kinetic projectile moving at 90% the speed of light. The asteroid mining crews had accelerated a chunk of dense metal using human industrial technology, creating a weapon that hit with the force of a small star. The Apex Predator, pride of the Vorthan Navy, simply disintegrated upon impact. Captain Hyejin Bayek commanded a squadron of the new human destroyers, their hulls sleek and predatory. "Launch the swarm missiles," she ordered, watching as hundreds of small projectiles erupted from her ship's weapon bays. Each missile carried a fragment of the alien crystals from Kepler 442b, allowing them to punch through Vorthan armor like it was made of paper. The Vorthan fleet tried to respond, their own weapons systems charging up to fire back at the human attackers. But their plasma cannons and particle beams seemed almost primitive compared to what humanity had unleashed. When Vorthan energy blasts struck human ships, they met shield systems that had been designed using technology stolen from a dozen different alien races and perfected by human ingenuity. "Their weapons are barely scratching our hulls," reported Lieutenant Sun Hee Cho from the bridge of the Eternal Guardian. "Our shields are holding at 98% efficiency." The battle, if it could even be called that, lasted less than 6 hours. Vorthan ships that had terrorized a dozen species across the galaxy found themselves outmatched in every possible way. Human vessels moved with precision that seemed almost supernatural, their formations flowing like liquid death through space. Every shot they fired found its target. Every maneuver they made brought them closer to total victory. Dr. Yuna Shin, now serving as a weapons officer aboard the Scientific Revenge, watched her fusion-powered cannons reduce a Vorthan battle cruiser to its component atoms. The same technology she had spent years developing to power colonies now served to destroy the enemies of humanity. "Target eliminated," she reported, her voice hollow with the weight of what she had become. The Vorthan homeworld surface installations began launching escape pods and emergency transmissions. Their high command, creatures who had ruled through fear and violence for centuries, now begged for mercy from the species they had dismissed as insignificant. "Please, we surrender. Call off your attack. We can negotiate terms." Admiral Lee received the transmission on his command bridge, the desperate alien voices translated into human speech by his ship's computers. Around him, his officers waited for his response. Some expected negotiations, others hoped for terms of surrender. Instead, Lee simply muted the communication and turned to face his tactical display. The memory of little Jinu Kim crying over his mother's body played on a small screen beside his command chair, a reminder of why they had come so far. "Continue the assault," he ordered quietly. "Show them the same mercy they showed Dr. Hana Kim." The final Vorthan stronghold fell as the sun set on their homeworld for the last time. Orbital cities that had stood for millennia became expanding clouds of debris. Shipyards that had built fleets for 1,000 years turned into twisted metal floating in the void. The mighty Vorthon collective, conquerors of 17 systems, ceased to exist in the span of a single day. When the last Vorthon vessel had been destroyed, when the last defensive platform had been silenced, Admiral Lee stood in the wreckage of an empire and activated his communicator one final time. His message would be broadcast to every species in the galaxy. This is what happens when you harm our children. Remember this day. The human fleet began its journey home, leaving behind 15 star systems that would serve as the eternal reminder of humanity's judgment. Admiral Taemin Lee stood on the observation deck of his flagship, Hana's Shield, gazing down at the smoldering remains of the Vorthon homeworld. The planet's surface still glowed with the heat of 1,000 impact craters, where human kinetic weapons had struck military installations with the force of falling stars. What had once been the proud capital of a galactic empire now looked like a dying ember floating in the cosmic void. Behind him, communication officers worked frantically to coordinate the largest occupation force in human history. 15 star systems had fallen in 6 hours, and now humanity faced the challenge of managing an empire they had never wanted but felt compelled to control. "Sir, we're receiving surrender transmissions from 47 Vorthon colonies," reported Captain Seojun Yoon, his voice carrying the exhaustion of someone who had witnessed the complete destruction of an alien civilization. "They're requesting terms for peaceful transition." Lee activated the fleet-wide communication system, his words broadcast not just to the human ships surrounding the conquered worlds, but to every corner of the galaxy through quantum relay networks. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of humanity's judgment across the stars. "The Vorthon collective is hereby dissolved," he announced, his tone as cold and final as deep space itself. "All former Vorthon territories will be placed under human administration until such time as their populations can be relocated to designated reserve worlds. Military reparations will be paid to every human family that suffered under Vorthon aggression." He paused, looking at the tactical display, showing Vorthon survivors huddled in emergency shelters across their former empire. These were the same creatures who had dismissed the massacre on Kepler 442b as pest control, who had laughed when humanity demanded justice for Dr. Hana Kim's death. Surviving Vorthon populations will be relocated to 3 worlds in the Kepler sector, under strict supervision. They will be provided with basic necessities for survival, but their spacefaring capability is permanently revoked. Any attempt to develop military technology will result in immediate exile to the galactic rim. The response from other alien civilizations was immediate and terrifying. Species that had considered humanity barely worth noticing suddenly found themselves re-evaluating everything they thought they knew about the galaxy's newest members. The crystalline hegemony, masters of energy manipulation, sent urgent diplomatic messages offering trade agreements. The Silicon Confederacy, whose robot armies had conquered dozens of worlds, transmitted formal treaties of non-aggression. On Earth, 8-year-old Jinu Kim sat in the living room of his new home in Seoul, watching the broadcast on the large holographic display. His uncle, Sergeant Hyunwoo Kim, sat beside him, still wearing the uniform he had worn during the vengeful campaign against the Vorthons. The veteran's weathered hands rested gently on his nephew's shoulders as they witnessed the end of the war that had begun with his sister's sacrifice. "Is it over, Uncle?" Jinu asked quietly, his young voice carrying wisdom far beyond his years. The trauma of watching his mother die had aged him in ways that no child should experience, but he had also become something more, a symbol of humanity's protective instinct. Hyunwoo nodded slowly, his own eyes fixed on the images of surrender, coming from across the galaxy. "Yes, little one, it's over. The bad people who hurt your mama can never hurt anyone again." The boy held up the fossilized bone he had been examining when the Vorthon raiders attacked, the same artifact that had indirectly led to the development of humanity's most devastating weapons. Scientists had discovered that the crystalline formations on Kepler 442b were actually fossilized remains of an ancient species that had mastered energy manipulation millions of years ago. "Mama's discovery helped us win, didn't it?" Jinu asked, turning the ancient bone over in his small hands. Your mother saved the entire human race, Hyunwoo replied, his voice thick with emotion. Not just you, but all of us. Every human in the galaxy. Across human space, memorial services were being held for the 12 colonists who had died on Kepler 442b. But it was Dr. Hana Kim who had become the symbol of humanity's transformation from peaceful explorers to galactic predators. Her image appeared on monuments being erected in every human city, her name spoken with reverence in every human home. The galaxy's power structure had shifted permanently. The Galactic Assembly, which had dismissed humanity's calls for justice, now found themselves scrambling to accommodate their newest and most dangerous member. Ambassador Minji Park, who had walked out of their chambers in disgust, returned as humanity's representative with demands that could not be ignored. Humanity claims the right of protection over all developing species, she announced to the assembled alien delegates, her voice carrying the same quiet menace that had preceded humanity's war of vengeance. Any species that threatens civilian populations, especially children, will answer to us. The alien representatives, creatures from dozens of different worlds with vastly different biologies and cultures, all understood the message perfectly. The humans had proven they could eliminate an entire galactic power in a single day. None of them wanted to test whether humanity would show similar restraint in the future. On the mining stations of the asteroid belt, workers who had volunteered their industrial equipment for the war effort returned to peaceful operations. But their mining lasers and kinetic accelerators remained ready, capable of being converted back to weapons within hours if the need arose. The message was clear. Humanity's capacity for violence was always present, barely hidden beneath their peaceful exterior. Dr. Junho Kang returned to his laboratory on Europa Station, but his fusion research had been forever changed. The same equations that powered cities could also level them. The same magnetic fields that contained peaceful energy could focus it into weapons of unimaginable destruction. He understood now that knowledge, like humanity itself, could be both creator and destroyer. The Vorthan survivors, relocated to their designated reserve worlds, would spend the rest of their existence as a living reminder of what happened when someone harmed a human child. Their former empire became a monument to humanity's wrath, 15 star systems that would forever bear the scars of judgment delivered with mathematical precision. Other species throughout the galaxy began teaching their young about the humans, not as the peaceful explorers they had once seemed, but as sleeping giants who became unstoppable when awakened by the cries of their children. The lesson was simple and absolute: touch a human child and face the wrath of an entire species. In the years that followed, no alien species would ever again dismiss humanity as insignificant. They had learned that humans were indeed fragile as individuals, but harm their young, and they became something far more dangerous than any weapon ever devised. They became inevitable. The galaxy would never forget the fire that had consumed 15 worlds in a single day, or the judgment that had rewritten the balance of power among the stars. Dr. Hana Kim's sacrifice had transformed humanity from victims into protectors, from explorers into guardians of the innocent throughout the galaxy. The end.